Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I hope that you are all good. So in today's video we're going to be doing a Halloween ombre acrylic set of nails. So to start off with, I am working on my Glamerliz practice hand. I've already applied some stiletto tips and my thin clear acrylic base. So we're ready to jump in with the acrylic design. For today's acrylics, we're going to be using the CJP acrylic system, and I'm going to be using this beautiful shimmery orange called Malibu Sunset to begin with. So I'm going to do ombres like you see. So I'm coming in with that Malibu Sunset and I'm working with quite small beads of acrylic, and I'm placing this down at the tip of the nail, basically covering the tip and then blending it back into that natural nail bed area. Whenever you're doing any kind of ombre, you want to make sure that you're really blending back that color so there's not a harsh line where this color ends, because that way when you then come in with your nude or whatever color ombre or whatever color you're going to ombre over the top, it all blends out nicely without it having a harsh line for it to cover. Now with this particular color, I found it a little bit of a strange consistency. Like the powder is very fine, it's very pigmented, and it has quite a lot of shimmer in there, so it's a little bit strange when it comes to picking it up. So that's why I'm working with it in really small beads, just painting it on, blending it back, and then if I feel as though I need a little bit more, I'm going to come in with a little bit more to build up that color. It is, however, very pigmented, so a little bit does go a long way, but you can just see there it's just a little bit different to my other CJP acrylics, but nonetheless it's absolutely beautiful. You just have to work with it a little bit differently, or I do anyway. So as you can see, when it comes to blending back, I just flip my brush into reverse. Whilst it's still quite wet, I'm blending it back. Sometimes I'll blend back first and then take the colour down to the tip of the nail, but with this particular colour, because I was painting it on, I found it easy enough to just paint down onto the tip and then blend back. So sometimes you do have to change up what you're doing depending on the colour or the system you're working with. Here you can see here I just had a hardened bit of acrylic there in my acrylic, so I just picked that out and come in with a fresh bead of acrylic just so that we get a nice neat application without any unevenness. And as you can see, it paints on really easily. I'm just using a light touch with my brush and it's covering that entire nail tip. So once I have done all of the orange, I'm going to leave this to set, because I always like to allow my first colour to dry before I come in with my second colour. And for the second colour, we're going to be using the gorgeous Fantasy. This is one of my favourite pinky nude colours from CJP. It's absolutely beautiful to work with. It has a lovely consistency. It's opaque, so it's brilliant for covering your natural nail bed if you've got any imperfections, or if you want to do something like a smile line, but you can work with it a little bit wetter, and it's beautiful for an ombre, which is of course what we're doing here. So whenever I'm doing an ombre, I like to start off by placing down a small medium to wet bead to begin with, right where that orange fades out. So wherever my colour I've placed down is faded out, that's where I place that first bead of acrylic. And as you see, it was quite a small medium to wet bead of acrylic so that I can blend it down and start creating that blend. Personally, I find this a lot easier than coming in with one bead of acrylic down at the cuticle area and having to do my cuticle area and blend at the same time. Then I'll move on to my cuticle bead. So on to the next now, I'll talk you through exactly what I do. So you'll see picking up a small medium to wet bead, pushing it out to both the sides so that I know it's going to cover the sides, and then just gently swiping it down to create that blend. And then I do sometimes clean off the tip if I feel as though the core powder has taken over the coloured acrylic. I'll clean that off a little bit. Then I'm coming in with my larger, more medium to dry consistency bead, tapping that up into place in the cuticle area using the very tip of my brush, and then I'm using the belly of my brush to pat that acrylic out from side to side, and then I'm just going to feather it down ever so slightly over that previous bead of acrylic that we applied. I don't have to worry so much about creating the blend with this bead of acrylic because we did it with that first bead. I'm just feathering everything out using nice gentle strokes with my acrylic brush so that there's a nice transition between the Fantasy and the Malibu Sunset. Now, one thing I did find is Malibu Sunset has a shimmer in it and Fantasy is a flat colour, so there's no glitter, no sparkle. And what happened was, as the Fantasy blended over the Malibu Sunset, it kind of dulled the shimmer that was in that colour. So once I have done the Fantasy on all of the nails, I did decide to come back in and add a little bit more Malibu Sunset at the very tip of the nails so that you can see that shimmer a little bit more, but you will see that once we get to that step. This is also though why I like to work fairly thin with that first colour that I put down, so that if I do need to come in further along in the set with a little bit more of that colour, I have room to without creating a too thick or bulky nail. Now, talking of thickness and bulky nails, with these particular colours I'm using here, this particular core colour especially, it's a strength powder, so it doesn't need to be encapsulated. So when I'm laying down my fantasy acrylic, I'm building up the strength and structure for my cuticle and apex area, so that when it comes to encapsulating, I can just encapsulate from the fade downwards. Now, if you're not using a core colour, you will need to encapsulate the entire nail, but a lot of the time core colours are known as strength powders, so they are used to build up the nail, so then you don't need to encapsulate these ones, but we would still need to encapsulate these nails to protect that ombre and blend that we're creating. So moving on to the little finger, I'm finishing up that final ombre. When I'm working on the little finger, I always find it the hardest because you've got such a smaller area to work on. But by the way, I wanted to mention I'm absolutely loving this Young Nails acrylic brush. This is the Artistic Sculptor brush, and I'd say it's a fairly small brush, especially for me. It's a size 8 to 10, but I'm really loving it at the moment, especially for working on smaller nails. So like I mentioned, I'm going to come back in, as you see there, with a teeny tiny amount of that Malibu Sunset, and I'm placing this down at the very tip of the nail, kind of taking it from side to side, blending it to the tip, and then ever so slightly blending it back, just so that there's not a harsh line again where that colour ends. And where we're only using a really small amount, it blends in absolutely beautifully, and it kind of just again added a bit of a softer ombre fade effect, but then it's also bringing back a little bit more of that shimmer that the color has. However, in saying this, I then decided to matte top coat this set, so you don't actually see the shimmer anyway, but when I do the glossy top coat first, you guys will see the shimmer. So it was a little bit pointless, but at this point of the design, I didn't know that I was going to be doing these matte. So then I'm going to come in and encapsulate. So to encapsulate, I'm using my CJP Crystal Glass, which is the CJP Clear Acrylic. And what I like to do is I always like to run over the nail with my wet brush. I find that this makes my clear encapsulation layer glide on a lot nicer, especially when you're working over dry acrylic. Then I place down a medium-sized bead, and I've not got to take this up into that cuticle and apex area. So just blend it back slightly, just so there's not this harsh ridge. Then I'm patting it out from side to side and pulling it down towards the very tip of the nail, kind of walking it down. You don't want to pull the acrylic off. When I say pulling it down, I'm kind of just pulling down the top part of that bead of acrylic so that it's building up the strength and structure. Now, both the colours I used here are strength powders. So like I said, they don't necessarily need to be encapsulated. So we're mainly encapsulating to protect the blend that we've created so that we don't file into it. But also the tips are quite thin. We haven't added a lot of product to the tips. So I do want to make sure that they are strong enough. Although we're working on a practice hand, I do like to try and always be practicing building up my strength and structure. So onto that little finger again, wiping over with my wet brush, so just with a little bit of monomer, placing down my bead, blending out the back of it so it blends in nicely, and then pulling the sides down, and then just pulling the center of that bead of acrylic down, mainly focusing it on the spine of the nail. Off camera, I did file and buff these nails, and then I gave them a good scrub to remove all of the dust. And then we're ready for some stamping. So here I have one of the new Miss Lucy plates. This is the Halloween Doodles stamping plate. She recently launched a couple of new stamping plates and I loved two of them. So I went for the Autumn Leaves one, which I've used in a couple of my previous videos, but then I also picked up this Halloween one. Now, I'm not big on Halloween nails, but as soon as I see this plate, it just really inspired me. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to buy it and I'm going to push myself to enjoy creating Halloween nail art. Just in the previous years, it's never been a season that's massively made me feel inspired to do nails. But this plate is absolutely amazing. It's got some super cute Halloween designs on there, and I do feel as though it has more of that cutesy rather than horror gore vibe to it. So I do have a discount code for Miss Lucy, so I will leave that linked in the description box below. She has an amazing collection of plates and water decals, so do check her out. So on to the stamping. I'm giving my plate a good clean with some acetone. You want to make sure you always clean your plate before you pick up your next image. Then I'm loading that image with a generous amount of stamping polish, scraping, and then I like to do a quick flick of the wrist and roll my jelly stamper across. And as you can see, it picks up that image perfectly. Then any image that I don't want to stamp down, or so any excess image that you've picked up or anything you don't want to stamp down, I like to take that off of my stamper using my lint roller. You can of course stamp it down and then remove it with some acetone off of the nail, but I just find it a lot quicker and easier to remove it from my stamper rather than removing it from the nail. Then when it comes to stamping down that image, you can take a little bit of time to line it up where you want it to go, and then I like to firmly press down and give a little wriggle and rock from side to side and then lift off, and as you can see, it's stamped down beautifully. So the next image is a little layered ghost, so I'm actually going to come in with some white stamping polish first of all to stamp on the main body of the ghost. So you can see I picked up lots of excess image in here, so I'm just removing that using my lint roller. And then we've picked up that super cute ghost, and I'm going to just stamp him down just off center because I wanted to make sure I could fit some little bit more stamping on this nail. I kind of wanted to get a fair bit of stamping on because I absolutely loved this plate. Then we're going to come in with the outline of that ghost. Now, I'm not the best at layered stampings. It is a little bit tricky and it's not something I do all of the time, but as you can see, I picked up as normal. And then the tricky part is you've simply got to line this up and try and get it as perfect as you can. It's a fairly simple layered one, but I was just ever so slightly off. But with stamping, I think it kind of doesn't matter too much. It still gives off a great effect in my opinion. So once again, I've given that plate a good clean off camera using some acetone, and then we're going to come in and just add a couple of little stars on the end of this one. Now the image does have 3 stars. I just wanted to add 2 of them on, so I'm going to take one of those little ones off and just place this down on the tip of the nail just to add a little something more. And I love with this plate that all of these images will work together brilliantly. They all have that cutesy doodle vibe to them, so you could pop any of these together in a combination in a set of nails and they work really well together. I wanted to add in another one of those spider webs, so I went for the larger one this time, and even though it's quite a detailed stamped image, it picked up absolutely beautifully. Whenever I get a new stamping plate, I try to do a set like this where I can test out a few of the images to find out if any are tricky, any are difficult to pick up, things like that. But so far with all of my Miss Lucy plates, no matter what image I've tested out, they all pick up absolutely beautifully. I get lots of questions about what do I recommend stamping wise, and I always say good quality plates. Some cheaper unbranded, kind of the plates that you can pick up on eBay and AliExpress, although they're cheap, sometimes the images are not etched in them deeply enough, so then it can make it really hard to pick up the image. I especially love my Miss Lucy plates and my clear jelly stamper plates, as well as the Born Pretty ones as well actually, because all of their images I find they're etched nice and deeply in the plate, so it makes picking them up easy. Now it's time to come in and top coat. So originally I was going to do these glossy, so I've got my Kiki London top coat. Now this is a top coat that requires you to cleanse off the tacky layer, but this is my absolute favourite top coat for over the top of stamping, because some top coats can separate over stamping, where this one just has absolutely no separation at all. So it's one of my go-to top coats when I'm doing any kind of stamping nail art, and it does leave a gorgeous high shine finish to it. Like I said though, I did decide that I wanted to do this set of nails matte, but I thought I would leave in the glossy top coat part of this just so you could see what the nails would look like glossy, and then you guys can let me know in the comments below whether you preferred them glossy or matte. Another thing as well is sometimes I find matte top coats can smudge your stamping. It can make the stamping bleed a little bit. So a lot of the time, even when I'm thinking about doing a set of nails matte, I'll add a layer of glossy top coat to them first. And this one is perfect for that because it leaves a tacky layer. So it's great for you to add another top coat over the top of. So this is what they looked like glossy. I did think they looked absolutely gorgeous, but I wanted them matte. I really loved how the ombres looked matte, so I wanted to stick with that matte effect. So now I'm going to take my Kiki London No Wipe matte top coat, and I'm just applying this exactly the same as before, so just floating on a thin even layer to the entire nail. You want to be really careful when you're working around that cuticle or sidewall area. If you do get any on the skin, you just want to remove it with some alcohol before you pop your top coat into cure. And then once you have finished applying your top coat, I'm just going to pop this in to cure for 30 seconds. It does take a slightly longer cure if you're working in a UV lamp, but I know a majority of us now work with LED lamps. So this one cures for 30 seconds in an LED lamp, so nice and quick. And like I said, it's my absolute favorite matte top coat. It gives off such a gorgeous velvet matte finish. Now again, I do have a discount code for Kiki London, so I will leave that linked in the description box below as well. So do check out the description box for all of the products I've used along with any discount codes. And this, guys, is the finished set. So I absolutely loved them. I love this stamping plate and I loved how these ombres turned out. So I really hope you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, then please do give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment below. I hope you're all keeping safe and well, and I hope wherever you are, you're looking forward to spooky season. Thank you all so much for watching. Lots of love. Take care. Bye bye.